At 52, I thought 28 years of loyalty to Morrison Technologies meant job security, until my 34-year-old boss Derek Walsh slid that termination letter across the table and smirked. "We can hire 2 recent graduates for what we're paying you, old man." 3 weeks later, when his desperate calls started flooding my phone begging me to save the company from total collapse, I realized he was about to learn exactly what this old man was truly worth. My name is Robert Maxwell, and watching Derek Walsh destroy my career taught me that some people mistake kindness for weakness. 28 years I'd given Morrison Technologies, starting as a junior developer when the company had 12 employees and building every major system they relied on. I trained countless newcomers, worked weekends without complaint, and never once asked for recognition beyond my paycheck. Derek arrived 6 months ago with his fancy MBA and immediately started making changes. During his first team meeting, he looked around the room and announced his vision for a younger, more energetic workforce. His eyes lingered on me and the 3 other developers over 45. We all felt it, but nobody said anything. That's how these things start. Small comments that seem harmless until you realize they're building a case against you. The writing was on the wall when Derek hired 3 recent college graduates and assigned them to shadow our senior team. Knowledge transfer, he called it, but I knew better. These kids were eager and smart, but they had no idea how our legacy systems actually worked. When 22-year-old Tyler asked me to explain our customer authentication process, I spent hours showing him the security layers I'd built over decades. He nodded along, taking notes, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. "Why is it so complicated?" Tyler finally asked. "Because simple systems break easily," I replied. "What looks complicated to you prevents million-dollar security breaches." Derek overheard this conversation and pulled me aside later. "Robert, we need to modernize. These legacy systems are holding us back. Maybe it's time to simplify things." I tried explaining why our systems were designed the way they were, the failed attacks we'd prevented, the scalability challenges we'd solved, the regulatory requirements we had to meet. Derek listened with that polite smile managers use when they've already made up their minds. 3 weeks later, Jennifer from HR scheduled a meeting with me. No agenda, no explanation, just, "Derek wants to discuss some organizational changes." I knew what was coming, but 28 years of loyalty made me hope I was wrong. The conference room felt cold despite the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Derek sat across from me with a folder in front of him, Jennifer beside him with her laptop open. Neither would make eye contact. "Robert, we've been evaluating our staffing needs," Derek began, his voice steady but his hands fidgeting with a pen. "The company is moving in a new direction, and we need to make some difficult decisions." He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a termination letter and a severance package offering 8 weeks' pay after nearly 3 decades of service. "We can hire 2 recent graduates for your current salary," Derek continued, finally meeting my eyes. "Nothing personal, just business optimization." I read through the paperwork carefully while they watched. The silence stretched uncomfortably until I looked up and asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Is this about my age, Derek?" His jaw tightened slightly. "This is purely a financial decision based on market rates and skill alignment." But I'd heard him joke about putting the dinosaurs out to pasture just last week during a management meeting. I'd also seen his Slack messages about building a fresh, young team that could adapt to modern development practices. What Derek didn't realize was that I'd been quietly documenting every age-related comment he made over the past 6 months, and I wasn't planning to disappear quietly into the night. I spent my first week of unemployment doing something Derek would never expect. I studied employment law. 3 different attorneys told me the same thing. Age discrimination cases are hard to prove without clear evidence. Offhand comments and jokes wouldn't be enough, especially against a company with good lawyers. But Derek had been sloppy with his bias, and I'd been careful with my documentation. Every inappropriate comment, every joke about old-school thinking, every suggestion that younger employees were more adaptable, I had it all saved in a private folder with dates and witnesses. My friend Marcus, who still worked in the IT department, called me Thursday morning with news that made my coffee taste better. "Robert, you need to hear this," he whispered into the phone. "The customer portal crashed yesterday afternoon, and it's still down. Derek's been running around like a chicken with his head cut off." I wasn't surprised. The authentication system I designed had multiple security layers that required specific protocols to restart safely. I tried to document these procedures years ago, but management always said comprehensive documentation was low priority. "Tyler and the other new hires have been staring at code printouts for 12 hours. Marcus continued. "They keep asking where the system documentation is. Derek told them to figure it out." 47 minutes later, my phone rang. Derek Walsh. I let it go to voicemail and listened to his message while sitting on my back porch. "Robert, we have a small technical issue with the customer portal. The new team is working on it, but they could use some guidance on the authentication protocols. Could you give me a call when you get this? Thanks." His voice sounded calm, but I caught the slight tremor that meant he was worried. I deleted the message and went back to reading about wrongful termination cases. 3 more calls came that afternoon, each voicemail slightly more urgent than the last. By evening, Derek's professional mask was slipping. "Robert, this is getting serious. We've lost access to customer data for major clients. I'm authorized to offer you a consulting rate of $300 per hour. Please call me back tonight." I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone. 28 years of building systems that worked perfectly, and Derek had convinced the board I was expendable. Now those same systems were proving exactly how wrong he'd been. Marcus texted me updates throughout the evening. "Emergency board meeting called. Stock dropped 8%. Derek looks like he hasn't slept." The next morning brought a call from Jennifer in HR, her voice carefully controlled but with an edge of desperation. "Robert, I hope you're doing well. Derek asked me to reach out about a temporary consulting arrangement. The company is prepared to offer $400 per hour, minimum 8-hour engagement, to help resolve some technical issues." "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I wouldn't. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to Sandra Pierce, the CTO of Technova Solutions. I'd met Sandra at industry conferences over the years, and she'd always spoken respectfully about experience and mentorship in technology. Derek had made a fatal mistake when he assumed my value was tied to my age rather than my expertise. While he scrambled to fix systems he didn't understand, I was about to discover just how much the competition valued what I'd built. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "CO just walked into Derek's office. Doors closed but voices are getting loud." I smiled and continued typing my email to Sandra, realizing that Derek's business optimization was about to teach him an expensive lesson about the true cost of experience. Derek's desperation reached a breaking point when Morrison's biggest client threatened to walk away forever. Sandra Pierce responded to my email within 2 hours, and her message made me realize that Derek's biggest mistake wasn't firing me, it was underestimating what I knew about Morrison's weaknesses. "Robert, I've been following Morrison's situation with great interest," Sandra wrote. "Their current crisis presents unique opportunities for both of us. Can we meet tomorrow?" I drove to Technova's headquarters feeling curious about what Sandra had in mind. Their building was modern and impressive, with an open workspace that buzzed with focused energy. Sandra met me in her corner office, which overlooked the city's tech district. "Let me be direct," Sandra said, closing her laptop to give me her full attention. "We want to hire you as our Chief Technology Officer. 25% salary increase, full benefits, equity options, and complete autonomy over your technical decisions." The offer was generous, but Sandra wasn't finished. "There's something else you should know," she continued, lowering her voice. "We've been developing a customer management platform to compete directly with Morrison's system. Your insider knowledge of their technical architecture would be invaluable." I felt a mix of excitement and concern. "What about non-compete agreements and ethical considerations?" Sandra smiled knowingly. Our legal team reviewed Derek's handling of your termination. Age discrimination violates your employment contract, which makes your non-compete clause void. You're free to work wherever you choose. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from Derek. His latest voicemail mentioned that Morrison's board was questioning his leadership and that they were considering all options to resolve the crisis. That evening, Marcus called with an update that made me laugh out loud. Derek hired an emergency consulting firm for $50,000, Marcus reported. They spent 2 days analyzing your code and told him they need the original architect to fix it properly. Derek actually threw his coffee mug across the conference room. But Derek's next move crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. There's more, Marcus continued. Derek's been telling people that you deliberately sabotaged the system before you left. He's suggesting you built in hidden vulnerabilities as revenge. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. After 28 years of faithful service, Derek was now attacking my professional integrity to cover his own failures. I called Sandra immediately and accepted her offer. Excellent, Sandra said. When can you start? Monday, I replied. And Sandra? I think it's time Derek learned what real consequences look like. Over the weekend, I began documenting everything I knew about Morrison's technical weaknesses, not to hurt the company I'd served for decades, but to help Technova build something better. Derek had made this personal when he questioned my integrity, and I was done playing defense. Sunday evening brought one final call from Derek himself. His voice was strained and desperate. Robert, please, I'm begging you. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss my future. If you don't help us, I'm finished. Derek, I said calmly. 3 weeks ago you told me I was too old and too expensive. Now you're calling me irreplaceable. Which is it? The line went quiet for several seconds. I made a mistake, he finally admitted. Yes, you did, I agreed. Several mistakes, actually. But the biggest one was assuming that loyalty and experience have no value. I hung up and spent the rest of the evening preparing for my first day at Technova, knowing that Derek's real education was just beginning. Walking into Technova on Monday morning felt like stepping into my future, while Derek was about to discover that his past decisions had consequences he never imagined. Sandra introduced me to the development team as their new CTO, and I could see the respect in their eyes, something I'd stopped seeing at Morrison months ago. Robert will be leading our competitive platform development, Sandra announced during the staff meeting. His experience in enterprise customer management systems is exactly what we need to capture market share. The team was young but genuinely eager to learn, unlike Derek's hires who seemed more interested in impressing management than understanding the work. When I explained the technical challenges we'd face competing with Morrison, they asked intelligent questions about scalability, security, and user experience. Our biggest advantage, I told them, is that we can build this system right from the beginning, with proper documentation and training protocols. As I spoke, my phone vibrated with yet another call from Derek. I let it go to voicemail and continued the meeting. During lunch, I listened to Derek's message. His voice had lost all pretense of authority. Robert, Morrison lost its second-largest client this morning. The board has given me 1 week to fix the system or they're bringing in outside management. I'll admit publicly that letting you go was wrong. Just name your price. I deleted the message and called Marcus for an update. It's chaos over here, Marcus whispered from what sounded like a bathroom stall. Derek's been in emergency meetings all day. 3 more senior developers gave notice, and the consulting firm said they can't recreate your work without 6 months and $500,000. What about the new graduates Derek was so excited about? I asked. Tyler quit yesterday. Said he felt misled about what the job actually involved. The other 2 are overwhelmed and talking about leaving too. That afternoon, Sandra and I met with Technova's marketing team to discuss our competitive strategy. The plan was ambitious but achievable. We'd target Morrison's dissatisfied clients with a superior platform that actually worked reliably. How long before we can demonstrate a working prototype? Sandra asked. 6 weeks for basic functionality, 3 months for full deployment, I replied. Morrison's current crisis gives us a perfect window to prove we're a viable alternative. As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone rang again. This time it was Jennifer from HR, and she sounded genuinely panicked. Robert, please don't hang up. Derek asked me to call because he's been trying to reach you all day. The situation at Morrison is critical. We're prepared to offer you Senior Vice President of Engineering, your old salary plus 50%, complete autonomy over technical decisions, and a formal apology from Derek. Jennifer, I said calmly. 3 weeks ago Derek said I was too old to contribute to Morrison's future. What's different now? Everything's different, she admitted. We realize we made a serious error in judgment. No, you made a serious error in values, I corrected. You chose cost-cutting over competence, youth over experience, and ego over expertise. Those weren't judgment errors, they were character flaws. I could hear her typing frantically in the background, probably taking notes for Derek. Robert, what would it take to bring you back? She asked desperately. Time travel, I replied and hung up. That evening, Sandra called me at home with unexpected news. I just got off the phone with 2 former Morrison clients, she said excitedly. Word is spreading about their technical problems. Both companies want to discuss switching to our platform once it's ready. That's faster than I expected, I admitted. There's more. I heard through industry contacts that Morrison's private equity owners are getting nervous. Their stock price has dropped 30% since your termination, and they're considering selling before things get worse. I sat in my home office, looking out at the lake where I'd spent so many peaceful evenings after long days at Morrison. Derek had thought he was solving a budget problem by firing me, but he'd actually created an opportunity that would reshape the entire industry. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Derek just left the building carrying a box. Rumor is the board gave him until Friday to resign or be terminated. Thought you should know. I set down my phone and opened my laptop to review Technova's technical specifications. Tomorrow, I'd start building the system that would prove Derek wrong about everything: the value of experience, the importance of loyalty, and the cost of treating people as disposable. Some lessons can only be learned through failure, and Derek Walsh was about to graduate with honors from that particular school of hard knocks. Derek Walsh appeared at my front door on a rainy Thursday evening, looking like a man who'd lost everything, which, as it turned out, he had. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his designer glasses were crooked, and for the first time since I'd known him, Derek looked every bit his age. Robert, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can I come in? I stepped aside and let him enter my living room, curious to see how low he was willing to go. Derek sat heavily in my chair, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Morrison's board fired me this morning, he announced without preamble. Effective immediately. No severance, no recommendations, nothing. I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from him, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response. The whole company is falling apart, Derek continued. 4 more major clients canceled their contracts this week. The stock price hit rock bottom. The private equity firm is demanding answers that nobody can give them. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. They want to know how one terminated employee could cause this much damage. I didn't cause any damage, I replied calmly. I simply stopped preventing it. Derek's face flushed red. You could have helped us transition. You could have documented your systems properly. You could have trained the new team instead of letting us fail. His accusation revealed everything wrong with his character. Even now, facing the consequences of his own decisions, Derek was trying to blame someone else. Derek, let me tell you what really happened, I said, setting down my glass. You fired me because you thought experience was expensive and youth was cheap. You never asked me to document the systems. You told me documentation was busy work. You never wanted me to train the new team. You wanted them to replace me. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the lake. You made every decision based on short-term cost savings and long-term thinking never entered your mind. Okay, you're right, Derek admitted, his voice cracking. I was wrong about everything. But people are losing their jobs because of this mess. Good people who had nothing to do with my decisions. That hit differently than his other arguments, because it was true. Morrison employed over 300 people, most of whom were decent workers caught in the crossfire of Derek's poor leadership. What do you want from me? I asked, turning back to face him. Help me save the company, Derek pleaded. Come back as Chief Technology Officer. I'll resign publicly and recommend you as my replacement. You can fix this. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Derek had destroyed his own career through arrogance and short-sighted thinking, but watching him beg was uncomfortable. Derek, even if I wanted to help Morrison, it's too late, I explained. The damage goes beyond technical problems. You've lost client trust, employee confidence, and market credibility. Those things can't be fixed with code. Derek's shoulders sagged as the reality of his situation sank in. So that's it? You're just going to let everything burn? I'm not letting anything burn, I corrected. I'm building something better. I told him about Technova's new platform, the former Morrison clients who were already expressing interest, and the team of engineers who actually wanted to learn from experience instead of replacing it. We're launching in 6 weeks, I continued. With proper documentation, comprehensive training, and systems designed to scale sustainably. Everything you said was impossible to afford. Derek stared at me in disbelief. You're competing directly against Morrison? Against your own work? I'm competing against your management of my work, I clarified. There's a difference. As Derek prepared to leave, he made one final attempt to shift responsibility. You know this will destroy hundreds of jobs, he said accusingly. Morrison will probably go bankrupt. Derek, you destroyed those jobs the day you decided that cutting costs was more important than maintaining quality, I replied. I just refused to go down with the ship you sank. After he left, I sat in my living room thinking about the conversation. Derek had learned nothing from his failure. Even facing complete professional ruin, he still believed that someone else should pay the price for his mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Just got confirmation from Morrison's 3 largest former clients. They want to sign with us as soon as our platform launches. Derek's failure is becoming our opportunity. I smiled and opened my laptop to review our development progress. Derek had taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one he intended. Some people are so focused on short-term gains that they never see the long-term consequences of their actions. Tomorrow, I'd continue building systems designed to last, managed by people who understood that experience and wisdom aren't expensive, they're investments in sustainable success. Derek would have to learn that lesson the hard way, through unemployment lines and rejection letters that cited his role in Morrison's collapse. 3 months after Technova's platform launched, I received news that completed Derek's downfall in a way I never could have planned. Sandra called me into her office with a document that made both of us pause and consider the strange twists that business can take. Robert, I have something that will interest you, Sandra said, sliding a folder across her desk. Morrison Technologies is officially for sale. The private equity firm wants to cut their losses before bankruptcy proceedings begin. I opened the folder and read through the financial details. Morrison was being offered at 15% of its value from just 6 months ago. The company I'd helped build for 28 years was now worth less than most startup ventures. Here's the unexpected part, Sandra continued with a slight smile. Technova's board wants to make an acquisition offer. They want you to lead the evaluation and integration process. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. Derek had fired me to save money, and now I might be in charge of purchasing the entire company for pennies on the dollar. What would that mean for Morrison's employees? I asked, thinking about Marcus and the other good people still working there. We'd keep the valuable staff and retrain them on proper systems architecture, Sandra explained. Think of it as a rescue operation rather than a takeover. Over the next week, I toured Morrison's facilities as part of Technova's due diligence team. Walking through those familiar hallways felt surreal, especially when former colleagues approached me with a mixture of embarrassment and hope. Marcus met me in the old server room where I'd spent countless hours building the systems that Derek had dismissed as outdated. "Robert, I have to ask," Marcus said quietly. "If Technova buys Morrison, what happens to those of us who stayed?" "Depends on whether you're willing to learn new approaches," I replied honestly. Derek created a culture that resisted documentation and proper training. We need to rebuild that foundation. Most of us are ready for that, Marcus assured me. Derek's way nearly destroyed everything we worked for. The acquisition process took 2 months of negotiations, legal reviews, and financial analysis. When the papers were finally signed, Technova had purchased Morrison Technologies for $12 million, less than Derek's annual salary and bonus package had been. On my first day as Chief Integration Officer, I gathered Morrison's remaining staff in the main conference room. Some faces were familiar, others were new employees hired during the chaos following my termination. "I want to address something directly," I began. "Some of you might feel awkward about this situation, given how my employment here ended. I want you to know that I hold no grudges against anyone in this room." I looked around at the faces staring back at me. Derek made decisions based on short-term thinking and personal bias. Those were his choices, not yours. Moving forward, we focus on building systems and teams that will last. The integration process revealed just how much damage Derek's leadership had caused. Critical documentation was missing, security protocols had been ignored, and the technical debt had grown to dangerous levels. It took 6 months to bring Morrison's systems up to Technova's standards. During this process, I learned what had happened to Derek after his termination. According to industry contacts, he'd applied for several CTO positions but couldn't find anyone willing to hire him. The Morrison collapse had become a case study in business schools about the dangers of prioritizing cost-cutting over competence. 1 year after the acquisition, I was promoted to Senior Chief Technology Officer, overseeing technical operations for both companies. The combined organization had captured 40% of the regional market and was expanding into new territories. At the company's annual meeting, Sandra publicly recognized the successful integration and thanked me for turning a potential competitor's failure into our success story. "Sometimes the best business strategy," Sandra said during her presentation, "is simply treating experienced employees with the respect they've earned." After the meeting, I walked through the office space that had once been my workplace for nearly 3 decades. The environment was different now, more collaborative, more focused on sustainable growth rather than quarterly cost-cutting. Marcus, now serving as Senior Database Administrator, stopped by my office before leaving that evening. "Robert, I have to ask you something I've been wondering about," he said. "Did you plan any of this? The way everything worked out seems almost too perfect." I leaned back in my chair and considered his question carefully. "Marcus, I never planned for Derek to fire me, or for Morrison to collapse, or for Technova to acquire the company," I replied. "But I did plan to never let anyone question my professional worth again." "And Derek?" "Derek taught me that some people will only learn respect through consequences. I just made sure those consequences were thorough." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me back to where I started, but with completely different circumstances. Age hadn't been my limitation, it had been my advantage. Experience hadn't made me expensive, it had made me invaluable. Derek Walsh had tried to replace wisdom with enthusiasm and discovered that some things cannot be bought cheaply or learned quickly. Sometimes the best revenge is simply proving that the other person was wrong about everything that mattered.